Guys, Emilie's kit is finally out, and I have to say that she's the perfect example of how the notion of, oh, Nahida is so strong that every future Dendro character will be disappointing is just wrong. So Emilie is a Dendro character, and as I just implied, she covers a niche that nobody else filled before. Specifically, she makes the infamous burning themes much stronger. However, this premise shouldn't make you confuse her for a Nilu-type character, so not a character that makes the reaction itself stronger. It's actually the opposite, it's her damage that gets increased if she hits opponents that are afflicted by burning. This is a model that is similar to a character like Fremine, whose damage gets bigger if he triggers a shatter reaction on an opponent. So it's her damage that is the focus here, not reaction damage. And this is good, because burning has never quite been a bad reaction, both in terms of damage and utility, but the penalizing factor is that the Dendro sub DPS on those teams, on those burning teams, wasn't really dealing any kind of significant amount of damage, while Emilie is different. But let's go step by step. Emilie is a sub DPS that will deal field damage most of the time. In fact, she's a polyarm user whose normal attacks get no Dendro infusion, so you clearly don't want anything to do with them. The far more important part of her kit is the elemental skill that when used will summon sort of a lamp on field. This lamp will then start dealing Dendro damage to an opponent every second and a half for a total duration of 22 seconds. The cooldown of the skill is of 14 seconds, which means that in this case the cooldown exceeds the duration of the ability. This in theory should make it very flexible, because it means you'll have full uptime and then some of the lamp, maybe not as flexible as somebody like Nahida, but very convenient for sure. As a downside, the lamp can't be moved during its uptime, which means that if opponents step out of its range, it won't be able to hit them anymore. But considering that this range is currently said to be on the same level as the Dendro main character's burst when he has Hydra absorbed, it should be fine overall. But here comes the juicy part. This lamp can have 2 levels, and its damage will depend on the level it has at a given time. In fact, if Emilie is on your team and the opponent is burning, every 2 seconds said opponent will drop a scent. This scent will soon be absorbed by the lamp, and once it absorbs 2, it will level up and start dealing more damage. Also, every time 2 scents are absorbed, an extra attack will be thrown at your opponents and deal a lot of Dendro AoE damage. And this, my friends, is pretty much the majority of what she does. There is also the elemental burst, that however is just an extension of the elemental skill. The burst will summon a lamp as well and destroy any lamp that was on field prior to the cast. This lamp will be on level 3 and will deal damage to the opponents every 0.3 seconds for a total of 10 times. The cool thing about it is that after the burst is done attacking, it will create the elemental skill lamp on field. And if at the time of the burst cast a lamp was destroyed, the new one will also inherit its level. It's currently unclear if the duration of the skill lamp also gets reset by this recreation, but if it does, it will be very convenient because it will mean that you could use just the burst in a rotation and never the skill. And this will be manageable in about every scenario because Emilie's burst cost is of just 50 energy. So it looks like she has all the quality of life and off-field DPS should have in today's age of Genshin. But let's jump to the technicalities now, because the developers have tied Emilie to burning in the most extreme way possible, honestly. For starters, if she even attempts to trigger a quicken reaction, her damage gets reduced by 90% and she even gets to deal fewer hits. The polar opposite happens when she hits an opponent that is affected by burning, because she gets a damage bonus and she also gets to deal more hits. So they really want you to use her on burning, because otherwise her damage absolutely tanks. But burning teams have always kind of been risky in the scope of Genshin, because if you stay too close to an opponent that is affected by burning, your active character will also be burned. This causes considerable HP loss and historically made these kind of teams unpractical. Emilie fixes this by giving the whole team a 85% resistance to burning damage, just like that. And as a whole, overall I have to say that in terms of filling a niche, Emilie is pretty much flawless. Just to make a comparison with another off-field DPS that came out this year, so Chiori, Emilie's damage on a burning team with no particular buffs is on the level of Chiori's damage on a team that has a construct. Furthermore, it seems that Emilie's lamp can snapshot buffs at the time of casting. If this stays true, Emilie's damage in a situation where she's snapshotting Bennett's burst buffs, for example, would absolutely eclipse Chiori's damage in almost every scenario. But personally, I'm not that confident in this staying true, because in past betas, unit snapshotting has always been a bug, and I think this might be a bug as well. But let me tell you that even if Emilie's damage is just on the level of Chiori, she will be in an amazing spot. And the reason is that burning just has more useful applications than Double Geo has. Let me remind you that if you enjoy my channel but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support, and also go check my Wuthering Waves channel. So, burning teams. As I mentioned earlier, burning always had a lot of uses even before Emilie came into the picture. The main reason is that burning has always been one of the best ways to apply pyro on an opponent, and as a result, a great setup for melt or vaporize reactions. Characters like Neuvillette and Brisley massively benefited from this type of synergy in the past, but the issue with these teams is that the Dendro character, in many cases Nahida, always struggled to deal any kind of real damage. And here comes Emilie instead, that can guarantee the same type of synergy while dealing the kind of damage that you would only expect from one of the best sub DPS in the game. Compared to Nahida, it's really an embarrassing difference. It's basically like comparing Ayato's damage to Neuvillette's. Now, Nahida still has some advantages, in terms of utility specifically, because her application is more consistent and also better in AoE scenarios. It seems to me that Emilie's application is mostly single target oriented, which means that Nahida should be more consistent on making your main carry vapor melt in situations where you're facing many opponents. Additionally, Nahida providing elemental mastery buffs through her elemental burst means that the main carry is typically dealing more damage on earth teams as opposed to Emilie's teams. But honestly, I believe that Emilie's raw damage more than makes up for it. It's very high. Whether or not she makes the best teams for Neuvillette and Brisley, this is up in the air, we'll have to see, but as of right now, I think she can compete with Furina there, which is saying a lot. But burning is not just about utility, it's also about damage. Truth be told, the single target damage burning deals is nothing to write home about, but what's interesting is the AoE damage. In fact, when burning is applied on an opponent, it also propagates to nearby enemies, which means that it's a lot of guaranteed and frequent damage. The issue until now is that in order to get burning on a team, you would have to take aboard a Dendro character whose damage output will be 0, but Emilie fixes this. For one, as it currently stands, Emilie seems to be able to deal enough damage to replace Xiangling on all the Monopyro teams. I mostly looked at Arlecchino so far in this niche because I love Arlecchino, and the results are really promising. Still, it needs to be said that Xiangling deals damage in a wide circular range, while Emilie seems mostly single target oriented, so in AoE scenarios, Xiangling might have the advantage, but hopefully burning can make up for it, like the burning damage. And something you have to keep in mind here is that with all these calculations and results, I'm only showing you the worst case scenario. I'm assuming she can't actually snapshot, so I'm going against the current leaks. There is no deep food set holder on most of the teams I calculated, which means she gets no Dendro resistance reduction on opponents, and typically she's really getting no buffs, and yet competing with top tier sub DPS like Xiangling when fully buffed. And if you want to push Emilie to the extreme and assume she snapshots, she's on a team where she gets a lot of buffs, deep food maybe, then her damage gets almost close to that of a main DPS. And while I was calculating, I was wondering to myself, does this even make sense? Isn't this too high? And honestly, it's not really unrealistic. I fully believe that the way she is now, she just sets a new standard of how a niche character should be in the future. If I look at Chiori, she really got shafted in comparison, because while her damage profile can be similar, the way she gains it is much more restrictive. Burning has quite versatile use cases, and this bodes very well for Emilie. And I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe and also go check the Alhitam guide I made. Bye bye.